Good morning, welcome, and thank you very much for choosing to join this breakout session. My name is Donna Ford-Clark. I'm Product Director for BTEC at Pearson, and I'll be hosting this session along with Dion Broughton and Christine Hepworth-James. This breakout session is called Fit for the Future, Adult Learning in a Changing Skills Landscape. In this session, we'll be drawing on the theme from the keynote, from the keynote message, and we'll be exploring how skills needs are changing and how online and blended learning are being used in reskilling and upskilling adults. In 2018, the McKinsey Skills Shift report highlighted that there'll be a greater need for high-tech and high-touch occupations by 2025. High-tech meaning that these jobs will require a lot of digital skills, such as coding, programming, etc., and high touch meaning that it's all about interpersonal and soft skills. I think all the research we have seen over the last few years have told us quite clearly that the jobs of the future will require a combination of digital and soft skills. That was 2018. Roll forward 2 years and COVID happened, and the WEC Future of Jobs, that report in 2020 boldly stated that the future of jobs has arrived. What COVID has done is to accelerate what we expected to happen by 2025 or 2030 and squarely drag that back into the current. And so we are now faced with the future of jobs. It's not 10 years down the line or even 5 years down the line. One of the key things from the keynote message that stays with me is around 80% of the 2030 workforce is already in work now. That is alarming to some extent, and it really focuses on the need for reskilling and upskilling. And reskilling is going to be the challenge, and that's part of what we want to discuss and explore in this session. To help us with this discussion, we've got 3 panel members who are at the forefront of this reskilling challenge. So I will let them briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit of what they do in terms of adult reskilling, upskilling. So I'll start with Georgina. Georgina, do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Hello, I'm Georgina Ager. I'm one of the vice principals at the Bedford College Group, and I'm responsible for our Tresham campuses. I'm based in Kettering, and I oversee all of the curriculum at the college, and the Director of Adult and Community Learning reports into me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Georgina. We'll then go to Julian. Julian?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Julian Sample. I'm Assistant Principal at Harlow College. Amongst some other stuff, I've got responsibility for the part-time adult programmes that the college offers, and a large proportion of that are to unemployed people who are looking to reskill to get back into work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julian. And Joy.
Hi, Joy Cattile. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Barking and Dagenham College. My responsibilities include curriculum, teaching, learning and quality, and the Assistant Principal for Adults and Community Learning reports into me.
Thank you very much. So a very capable and able panel who are in the midst of all of this to be able to give us some insights as to what's happening on the ground. The format of the session is that we'll be looking at some key questions that we'll get the panel to be engaging with. There will be opportunities towards the end, if it does happen, for the audience to feed in questions. And we're also hoping to have some polling questions throughout. We'll see how that goes depending on the technology. So to start off, our first question is around the skills in demand and how the pandemic is changing that. So I'll start with Georgina first. So what are the demands you're seeing coming through in terms of skills, and how are you and the college you're working with, Georgina, how are you dealing and responding to this?
I think we'd already been doing quite a lot of development work on emerging skills, and I don't think those skills have changed with the pandemic. Perhaps some have come more to the forefront, but what we found actually is we have quite a big geographical area, and they vary very much from town to town, depending on the local industry and the local requirements. So we found that there's different skills coming through in the different adult markets that we have. So one of the markets is getting to work. Another one might be our promotion chasers or our retrainers with the technical practical areas. Or we've also got hobbyists who might come and do a leisure course. And for us, the biggest skills that we're seeing are probably, we're having to prioritise, there's quite a lot. So we're having to prioritise where we place our efforts. One of the areas where we're focusing a lot of work at the moment is construction. So we've got a new modern methods of construction centre that's being built in Bedford, and that's for off-site construction training. And that the adult offer there will be mainly short upskilling courses for existing tradespeople, but also some courses to train people from scratch and apprenticeships. And there'll be a differentiated approach for practitioners and managers. So that's a big area where we've seen growing demand. In engineering as well, in terms of digital engineering linked with our digital construction. We're also seeing emerging demands in science, and we're launching more science courses, particularly at science technician level, and also health science. And we're reviewing our digital offer at the moment to ensure that it's fit for purpose. And those are probably sort of on the higher level courses. But in terms of the get into work courses, we're finding a lot of demand for our community-based digital offer. So that's continued through the pandemic and delivered in the local towns, in the local community. We still think there's demand for that. We also see more demand for some of our wellbeing courses, particularly for unemployed. So we've got a few of those running at the moment as part of our JCP offer. And we're still offering our sector-based work academy programme, where we think that actually that is meeting employers' needs and customising our delivery for exactly what employers want in terms of their emerging skills. But one of the other ways we've responded is that we've had to look at our additional support for our learners as well, to make sure everyone can access our provision. And we've reviewed how we're doing additional support and our online assessments, and we've adopted new ways of supporting our students as well when they're not on our campuses. So that's the main summary of what we're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Georgina. Joy, do you want to?
Yes.
Question, Joy.
Yes, just to support what Georgina said, really, that a lot of the demand is still the same in the same sort of areas. Like, for example, for us, nursing and midwifery, counselling are big areas. Electric and plumbing are still in big demand, and also renewables. So we're designing new programs at level 4 as part of our Institute of Technology to tackle the renewables and so on. We've seen a lot of interest in digital at higher levels. So we are just in the middle of writing learning programs for the apprenticeship standards at level 3 and 4. For example, for digital marketers, data scientists, data analysts, and cyber. So that is something that is coming on board. Really want to support what Georgina said about the people getting into work. A big part of our focus has been and still is on getting people into employment or helping people to reskill and change sectors. And again, using the sector-based work academies to do that. And importantly here, it's giving people a taste of what the sector will be like, but also helping them to develop those personal skills. We work very closely with the DWP, and something we're working on at the minute is with the civil service. So they have a very, very rigorous recruitment process. So we handhold people through that recruitment process so they actually can compete, psychometric testing, verbal reasoning, all of these kinds of things. So I think that helps people to, whenever they're trying to make a shift, to give them that confidence.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Joy. And Julian?
Yeah, I think echoing what Joy and Georgina have said, we've certainly experienced some of the in-demand sectors prior to the pandemic continuing. So, specific to us in Harlow, we've got huge amounts of development going on, just in house building even. So that is obviously continuing. So we're seeing a lot of demand for construction courses, and I think we will continue to do over the next kind of 5 to 10 years. We've seen some elements of change. So I think something that's to change slightly is that, although it was always a fairly growing sector, is the care and health and social care. We've definitely seen more jobs and employment opportunities coming up in those, warehousing, logistics. But yeah, I don't necessarily think there's been huge shifts in that demand. One thing that we have noticed is the number of people who are coming to us for development opportunities that are perhaps not necessarily linked to a direct employment outcome. So that whole thing of trying to upskill digitally, I think there's the whole thing of where parents are having to, get to grips with online learning to help their children. So we're trying to help people develop those, so just how to use Teams and that kind of thing, and then also English and maths. So it's a bit of both. I think we've seen some change in terms of what people are having to do generally day to day now that perhaps they weren't doing, and in some of the growth sectors. But there's also been an element of the areas that were always popular continuing with that. And I think in terms of how are we responding to it, we're doing our best to try and work with the local JCPs to look at what those employment opportunities that are coming, and obviously the sector-based work academies, or the SWAPs that they're called now. I always get it back to the old terminology. Just helping to kind of link all of those things together. So working with the JCPs, communicating with the employers, just to find out what everybody needs, and then to provide those opportunities for people to have those routes into those job opportunities.
Thank you very much. It is clear that there is quite a lot of work happening there, and how we've had to pivot really quickly, how the education and training sector has had to pivot really quickly. And I think it's interesting that you note that some of these changes were happening prior to COVID. And I think it's true that COVID has accelerated some of these, but not necessarily that they weren't happening previously. I think I heard points about well-being, which was something that came out in the keynote message as well, and about equity and well-being, which is really, really important. And when we do have disruption like this, it does take a toll on people's well-being, and it does sometimes tend to destabilize equity, and it's about how we manage that. I think also I can hear those two trends coming through of those digital skills and those high-touch skills, midwifery, care. So I think we can see that the trends is actually going in line with high touch and high tech, which is quite interesting. So it's great to see that there is a lot happening now. So that's the first question. If we launch into our first poll question, can we do that?
I don't think we're going to be able to, because I think delegates are watching this through YouTube rather than through the platform for another tech reason, I'm afraid. So if we could skip the polls, I'm really sorry about that. That's
fine, we can live with that. So that was our first question. So it's around the emerging skills and industries that we're seeing coming through as a result of COVID. And I think it's key to say that a lot of these change had started prior to COVID. COVID has accelerated it in a lot of ways, and we can see how these changes are being handled. And I think one key thing that came through in the keynote message was around recovery training. And I can see that along with lifelong learning, there is a lot of recovery training which is happening now, which is absolutely critical considering what we've gone through last year and what we're continuing to go through this year. So it's really good to see that amount of work and how we've pivoted to take control of that. So the second question is around teaching and learning in upskilling, and how has the pandemic altered your perception of blended learning? What are the solutions you found particularly useful for adult learners? And I'll start this question with Julian. Julian, you want to start on this first, please?
Yeah, I think for me, the interesting part of that is the idea of perception of blended learning. I think at Harlow College, we started working with mindful education about 4 years ago on our leadership and management and finance provision. And for me, that was certainly when my perception of blended learning changed, because you kind of had this idea of what might be possible. Would it be popular? Would it be something that would take off? And certainly the quality of that platform, the resources, the aspects of it which actually removed barriers, but not moved complete to 100% online, and that idea of still catering for people coming into college, getting that support. That certainly altered my perception of it in terms of kind of how that's then moved forward. It has been popular. We certainly have grown our elements of our blended learning provision over the past 4 years. And then I think what happened is, you hear the term a lot at the moment, that kind of acceleration. And what's basically happened is we've then been forced to put more and more things blended, more and more things online. And that move to perhaps or what would happen in the future is a move towards a wider range or broader options for learners of being, 100% online, blended, as well as face-to-face. I think in terms of what I think will happen in the future, and has the pandemic changed my perception of that? I think then yes. I think that people will, through this, be realising that there are more blended learnings, there are more capabilities, there are more options available. It's not necessarily a poorer version of learning. I think sometimes people think that you've got to be in front of someone to kind of soaking up that experience and expertise that they can pass over. So I think for us, I don't think it's changed my perception of it. I think it's always been something that has obviously removed a barrier for people. I think anything where you can increase the options available to people, then that's always going to be a good thing. Whether we see, or I guess the better way to say that is how we see the percentages of things kind of move forward. I think that'll be interesting. We're in a situation at the moment where we're forced to do certain things. I think that can be kind of said around lots of things about even emerging sectors. So it will be interesting how, when life starts to return to normal, actually how human behaviour will kind of adapt, and will we stay with this whole online learning? I think there'll be lots of elements of it, but people still want to get together and do things. So for me, I think that's going to be the interesting part of that. In terms of solutions, I think that we've been trying to do whatever we can to make sure that learning can take place online. I mean, our staff have done fantastically well to really get to grips with things like Teams, Zoom, Shobi, those kind of software and apps. And really, what we've then also tried to focus on is not so much the delivery, during the actual program, but there's also the preparation work and the logistics of getting people enrolled and initial assessments completed and all that kind of thing. So I think it's been very interesting, and perhaps some of the things that we've made the most development with is that kind of move actually to more towards 100% online, where you kind of not able to do some of the things that are harder. You haven't got any opportunity to do those face-to-face. But yeah, I think it's obviously a very big learning curve for everybody. I think we've done very well so far, and then it'll just be a matter of seeing how we continue with certain things, and how that then looks forward in, I don't know, in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time.
Fantastic. And it's really interesting that you mentioned the poorer version of face-to-face teaching and learning, and it's going to be interesting to see how much of this we continue after. I think, and I'm sure you'll probably agree, there's so much that we've learned, and so much more that we've learned we can do with blended and online learning. So it's going to be good to see how much of that continues when we get back to normal, whatever normal looks like. So thank you very much. Georgina, do you want to pick up on that same question as well?
Yeah, I think for me, actually, the pandemic has sort of opened the eyes to the wide variety of approaches, because we, like Julian, have been using some blended products, but actually our staff the pandemic has allowed lots of experimentation and lots of creativity in how we deliver our adult offer, and it's allowed teachers to try different things. And so that has actually opened my eyes that there are lots of different ways you can do things. And secondly, we've now got a lot more research and intelligence on what approaches work best for different types of adult markets. So I'm hoping that as we go on, we'll be able to use that research and that information to really put together programs that really meet our learners' needs. So that's quite exciting, really. But I think in terms of what we found useful, I think for us, and this is something I will take forward, is having multi ways of offering courses. So, for example, you might have live delivery, then it's recorded so it can be watched later. You might have packs of information for other learners, and they might all be in the same group. So that flexibility of having lots of different types of delivery approaches for adults in the same group is a really interesting one, and something that we want to explore more. And the other thing that's come out really is the importance that our adult learners still place on individualised feedback and support, and the extra well-being type support that the college can offer our adult learners. And that's remained and has obviously become more important as time's gone on. So that is something that we need to consider, because I think 100% online, that can get lost if we're not careful. And then just making sure that for whatever type of approach that's adopted, that it's right for those adults, that they've got the right mindset to be successful on that approach that they're doing, however that is. So I suppose in a nutshell, it's flexibility and more individualised approaches than we've perhaps had previously.
Okay, thank you very much. Joy, do you want to?
Yeah, I think my colleagues have covered a lot of this. Just to add something that has come out as being really important as well as collaboration, so that students get a chance to interact and actually collaborate, and using different tools to do that has been important. And Julian mentioned mindful education. I think what we've learned is that we really benefit from working with partners, whether that is for content or also for having actual platforms where we can put a blended package on. So those are really the two key things from me.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So if I try to summarize, I think I'm hearing that in terms of blended learning, this is something that has started prior to COVID. Like other things, COVID has helped to accelerate it in terms that there's a lot more experimentation now. There's a lot more trying new things. And it's around continuing to do that and finding what works for different types of learners. I think, Georgina, you mentioned this about having multiple approaches in terms of blended learning, not just where it's completely online, because of course some learners will get lost like that, but it's bearing in mind that people learn in different ways, and it's been able to have that multiplicity of approaches to ensure that we don't leave any particular learner behind. I'm going to pick up on two things. I'm going to add a couple of cheeky questions in here. Sorry. I just saw a question that popped up from the audience, so I'm going to weave it in because I could see it. And one thing they raised was around the isolation. And I know somebody mentioned around the preparation that this takes. And I can see that. I've got a daughter who's in primary school, and every day I'm amazed at what comes through for her online learning, because I am just thinking of the amount of time it's taken to prepare that. And there was a point that came through around the isolation and working in isolation. And this way of working does sort of feel very isolated. What sort of tips would you give, or ways of working would you be able to say to sort of make that feeling less, is to reduce that feeling of isolation? I live next door to a teacher, and she says, I stay in my little room all day and I record videos. She doesn't see anybody else. And I can imagine when I saw that, I can imagine that a lot of teachers probably do, and trainers and lecturers probably feel this way. So to the panel, any ideas around how you could deal with that?
I think it's what we're finding is actually you need to really think about the behaviour of students in a completely different way. When we've done things for however many years face to face, learners behave in a particular way. When they're doing blended learning, that changes. When they're doing 100% online, that completely changes again. So certainly for us, it's been not having any preconceptions about how people might behave. And I think at the moment, the issue of isolation is obviously heightened because, the lockdown and all that kind of thing. So I think moving forward, that people will feel less isolated when they're doing blended learning, online learning. But we've certainly found that it's about, part of education is creating a relationship between teacher and student in whatever way that might be, and it's trying to make sure that you still foster that relationship, and whether that's, you know, in face-to-face, that's obviously a lot easier because you have the person there and you can converse with them and support them and all that kind of thing. But when you're doing blended learning and online learning, it perhaps needs to be more directed through email or telephone calls, or and just checking in with people. And we've certainly found that in terms of engaging and enthusing our learners, it is harder to do with blended learning. And that's where we've redeployed some staff to be able to perhaps make those calls, just checking in with people, making sure that they're okay, that they've got everything that they need, and perhaps just taking that more one-to-one kind of direct approach has certainly helped us. And again, it's another thing that we're kind of learning with and adjusting with, and we'll see how things kind of progress forward with that.
Thank you. Those are some really good points, Julian. Georgina or Joy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about blended learning, isn't it? It's you know, having the live sessions, and adult learners have told us how nice it is for us to come into their living room and be there, and they look forward to it and look forward to that interaction with their peers. So it's the social side, the collaboration, and the live face-to-face sessions. And also for adults, Gillian mentioned there, the one-to-ones. So it's getting a mix. So it's not relying fully on online learning. I think getting that mix is important. Fantastic.
Georgina, do you want to add anything?
The only thing really, because I am myself concerned about teacher workload and teacher isolation, and I think where we can, which we are trying to buy licenses for products that we can use alongside the live sessions so that they help. And I think that's something that we're definitely looking at in our areas.
Fantastic. And I like what you mentioned, Joy. It's around blended learning, and we must be conscious and cautious of this sort of, you know, leaning more to online learning completely, and it's thinking about learner needs and well-being and that social side of learning, isn't it? Because it's really important for learners to learn from each other, whether they're adult or youngsters, etc. The social aspect of learning is so important. My second cheeky question is around digital. I know there is this you know, that there are a lot of adults lacking digital skills. You know, somebody mentioned earlier around basic digital skills, and that being a part of the emerging skills need. Have you found limitations coming through with your blended learning package where the lack of digital skills is having an impact on that? And that's for anybody to sort of have a go at.
Yeah. One group that we haven't talked about, which we have found there have been barriers, are, you know, adult students with SEND. So we have had to be very careful to, you know, train them and also train parents and carers and as to how they can actually access the blended learning. So that has been one group where we've had particular challenges.
Fantastic. Thank you. Anybody else wants to add anything here?
Yeah, we've certainly seen one barrier that obviously is heightened through this is access to equipment, access to a good internet connection, the skills to know how to create the account that you need to then log on and do certain things. So I think that's where what we're certainly looking to try and do is, as we move forward, just have this as another option. I don't think it fits everybody. And in kind of removing one barrier for one group of people, you're actually creating another barrier for another group of people. And then one thing that we've kind of struggled around as well is that whole thing of developing someone's digital skills remotely. You know, and I always say, by the time you've turned your iPad on and loaded up, whatever it might be, you've kind of got to a certain level of digital skills. So it's how do you get to that point that I think remotely is very, very difficult.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julian. Georgina, you were going to add something?
Well, it was only the importance of a really good induction. And we've been lucky this year that in many cases we've been able to do that face-to-face with with adults coming in. So I think for us the next step is how do we do those digital inductions remotely for students who aren't able to come in face-to-face to do them.
Fantastic. I think we're going to pause here, and I think we've got a couple of questions. I did manage to pick up a couple, but Dion and Christine, are there any questions there?
Yeah, so the first question that we've had in, Donna, and I guess this is aimed at our FE colleagues. How are you supporting adults who want to start their own businesses?
Yeah. For us, that is through one of the sector-based work academies. So again, just following the same structure, supporting them with confidence, personal development, but then also designing the academy program that they are looking at maybe financial skills, marketing skills, and just covering the personal development skills and the skills they need to start up their business. Maybe taking some modules from a business program, for example, to give them that sort of help.
Thank you very much, Joy. We're going to take one more question because we're running short of time. So is there another question that we could answer really quickly?
I think one of the ones that came through is regarding coding and software development programs for adults, despite it keeps on coming up in main areas of development. And they just somebody wondered, have any of you had any success with this?
Yes, so we've had, and yes, one of the areas that's come through is like coding, cybersecurity, those higher level digital skills. We have recently started working with the Code Institute, actually, who've got some really good courses, and again have got a platform with some with all the blended learning stuff built in. But then we've also done some stuff with like the Cisco, the vendor qualifications and that kind of thing, and we've normally delivered those face to face, and they're going through the process now of trying to get those on blended. And what we're doing, I think the easiest way really to get something blended is doing what we're calling like virtual. So you use Teams or whatever to kind of have your lesson as kind of semi-live, I guess. And yeah, so we're doing what we can, but again, it's that trying to find where possible those platforms that are of high quality and allow certain kind of, because we're not experts in creating these materials and that kind of thing. So to a certain extent, it does rely on people to have created those, and then us being able to, I say us as in education providers, being able to access those and use those alongside what we're doing in terms of our teaching.
Thank you very much, Julian. I'm sorry we don't have much more time. It's such an interesting conversation. I wish we could continue, and I hope we can offline. I'd be really keen to continue the conversation with you. Thank you so much for contributing, for all your points, and I think there's some really clear things that I'll take away from here, and I do hope the audience are able to take away things as well. So thank you very much, and I thank you very much for listening and for sharing, Georgina, Julian, and Joy. So thank you.
Thank you.